Let the Super Bandit games begin. We've had this kit sitting in the shop for a while. This is going to be an amazing assembly. Looking forward to this. This is a classic. If you guys have been in jets for a while, you know what airplane this is. An absolute classic, awesome assembly coming up. But first, let's unbox this BVM Super Bandit. All right, so it's been a while. Hopefully she's all in good shape. Nez has come to help because she heard that we were doing an unboxing. Beautiful. This is what she comes like, stuffed full of styrofoam. We're gonna get rid of all the styrofoam and we will take a look at what's inside. So we pull all the bubble wrap and styrofoam off, and that is what we have in the box. Now I believe this has been unboxed before, or opened up at least. So let's start taking apart these parts and see what is inside. All right, so we have obviously the fuselages in the middle here. We've got a set of standard kind of BVM plans, which is awesome, full-scale plans. We'll go through each of these boxes kind of individually and see what's inside. Now, there's quite a bit of history with this aircraft. Quite a unique story, but we won't talk about it right now. So we've got our BVM tanks. So we're just going to take a quick look at all this stuff, and then we'll get it laid out on our table for preparation to do our build. Tail cone, we've got a little former there. Don't want to lose that because that's probably an important little thing. And we've got a set of electric retracts with a massive manual just for the retracts. Very cool. So these are the classic BVM purples, high-vis tabs. So BVM purples with the down and locked conversion. We've got all the BVM wheels as well. Some extra pieces and stuff, so that is good. All right, so we've got some elevator covers. And it looks like our wings. Let's unpackage these guys with some very serious carbon looking sticking out of the wings. Beautiful. That is awesome. So our surfaces are loose right now, and there's a shot of the root of the wing side, some massive carbon spars in there. That is super cool. We got our gear cutouts marked, our aileron cutouts marked. Very nice. All right, so we got parts kind of tucked in everywhere here, so we'll take a quick look at them. This looks like all of our stock BVM stuff. So we've got high flow tank fittings and big T's. Yeah, that's all of our fuel fitting stuff, so we'll just set that aside. And this is probably a main fuel tank if I had to make a guess. It is. Okay, we want to make sure we go through all the little pieces of paper to make sure we don't leave anything behind. Oh, we got Tygon line, BVM Tygon line, and our elevators or horizontal stabs. That's an important one in this assembly. Yes. Beautiful. Now those are hefty for sure. So we've got, it looks like titanium. If I had to guess, I'd say that's titanium. It may be stainless, but nice pins and beautiful elevators. So that last one that we had was the rudder. This is the elevators. So that was the vertical stab. These are our horizontal stabs. Yes. And this is a solid pin, or two-piece, no, solid pin. That is awesome. Looks good. Crazy stiff. Whew. and our other horizontal stab. Okay, so I think that's everything. We are going to pull the fuselage out now. So we'll pull the fuselage out, kind of get this stuff reorganized, and we'll take a look at the fuselage, pulling the hatches off and such. So we got the fuselage sitting on the bench here. So let's start pulling these hatches off and take a look at it. All right, so front hatch off. We've got a few things jammed in here, so we'll pull these guys out. So we've got our intakes. This is inlet extension, intake, and some absolutely beautiful fiberglass work. I'll show you guys the inside here in a moment. So we've got our hatch here as well too. You can see just beautiful, beautiful workmanship. This plane is built very strong, but very light. Okay, so inside here we've got, looks like all of our former work and all of our structure and stuff. So I'll just show you guys this quickly. The manual is going to be extremely important for this aircraft because it tells us where all this stuff goes during the assembly. All right, so here's a bunch of our parts. I think that is just paper. Wing parts, nose gear door assembly, stab group, swept fin group, wow, stab and fin mounting group, servo mounting group, tank support, tail cone, elevator control linkage, carbon fiber Super Bandit, aft fuse insulation. That looks like tank or pipe insulation. We've got a bunch of our control horns there and a whole wing parts group as well. And we've got a bunch of maybe hinging rods or something, but control rods and sheathing. There we go. So beautiful. I'll pull you guys in and we'll take a look at the inside. All right, so just a quick shot of the inside here. We've got a bunch of carbon, obviously where your gear structure is going to be going in, but just beautiful workmanship throughout this aircraft. Really, really nice. A whole wood piece built into the structure here as well. And there's a shot down the tailpipe from the front. Okay, so we do have one more box. Now that other box is going to have probably the tailpipe in it and probably the canopy glass. So let's open up that other box and take a look. All right, so we got quite a bit of stuff in this other box, more than I was expecting actually. We've got a AMT 280-400 installation. That goes back a while and dates this thing. Super Bandit PEG bypass hardware kit, and that goes with our BVM bypass unit here. So we'll just keep that all together. And then we've got our pipe. All right, so our exhaust pipe here. And that is awesome. Very nicely made. It's definitely hefty. If I was to compare this to something, it feels like a Carf Ultra Flash pipe. Really, really stout on the inside. Really well made. Good materials. So the one thing I don't see is canopy glass. I'm not sure if you do canopy glass or if it's just a painted finish. So anyways, not too worried about that, but that is all of our parts. All right, now we've taken some time and laid everything out here on our various tables. So we've got all of our fuselage pieces, wing pieces, tail end pieces, all on this workbench to begin with. We've got our manual all set up here as well too in our binder. And we've got all of our parts organized over here. So our plans are on one table, parts are on another table. Now we've got clear access to everything. Pretty important step in something like this because you've got to stay organized, you've got to be able to find everything, and a build like this is going to be very, very intense. So what we're doing on this aircraft is we're number one going to actually build the aircraft. I just kind of took a quick glance through the manual, and it looks like we'll be doing some of the servo installs. Then we'll be painting this aircraft as well too, which is going to be tons of fun. Don't have a scheme picked out yet. And then of course we'll be doing the final build of the aircraft. So this is going to be a very in-depth series. Hopefully you guys are ready for this. And I suspect very, very soon we'll also be starting the BVM T33. That's right there, which is, right now it's mine. So that's going to be a fun one to build too. Basically the same kind of scenario as this Super Bandit. So what we're going to be doing in this build series is just going through the manual like it's all laid out. So the first parts of the BVM manual start off with how to glue, protecting your surfaces and such. And then once we get to page 9, we get into the actual first portion of the manual. And the first portion here is the nose cutout. So let's take a look at that on the fuselage. All right, so here's the underside of the fuselage. We've got our nose cutout. It looks like there's an air brake right there. And then we've got our engine hatch access right here as well, I think. So that is, yeah, just kind of taking a look at all this stuff. Very, very nice. So that's going to be the first step that we're going to take care of here is in the manual, cutting this guy out. Now we want to make sure that we are cutting this very accurately because of course these become our nose gear doors. So first step in the manual is to cut out the nose gear door. Now we are going to, as it states in the manual, outline the lines that are molded into the fuselage. And the reason for that is they're very faint lines, and that helps to make sure that your lines are put in the correct location. So when we're doing thin cuts like this or doors, you want to make sure you use the Dremel 409 discs. These are the really, really thin discs that leave the narrowest finish on your opening. So really nice for cutting hatches. You have to be really careful though because they're quite fragile. All right, so we got the hatch cut here, and one thing I like to do is leave the corners intact. Two reasons. Number one, it makes sure you don't overshoot the corner, and the other thing is it keeps all this in place, so you don't have a latch flapping around if you were to cut all three of those sides and then trying to cut this with everything flopping around. So then you can take a Zona saw and just finish off each of the corners. Until they're free like that. All right, and then to split the door, we've taped down the middle, left our crease right in the center of the tape, and now we'll just cut the doors in half. I have marked them with Sharpie so I know which way's forward, and let's cut it. So we've cut the nose gear door in half. Next step in the manual is to drill out the dimples. So we're starting off with a 1/16 drill bit to find center as instructed in the manual. And then the next step is we want to use a 7/64 or 1/8 drill bit to finish off the hole. So we'll go with 7/64 because it's a slight step down. 1/8 is a slight step up. So next step here, we take our prep for the nose door to the actual door. So we've got our forward location here. Make a notch 3/32 by 7/8 in the forward part of the nose gear door to make it look like that. We've marked it out with white paint marker, and we are going to make that notch now. So we've prepped our front location here, sanded this all down. That's really important when you're dealing with stuff like this, gluing things against fiberglass and existing layups. You really have to make sure that you sand it and prep it well. Now this is the front piece for the locator for the hinges and everything. So this gets put in, there's a little notch right there that gets lined up with the center line. It's kind of important because if you flip this over the other direction, it does not line up properly at all with the holes. So it kind of goes together one way, and I've marked the T for the top there. So we're going to get this glued in place. and then we are going to glue 1/2 of our hinge side in place. All right, so Nez is over here inspecting all the parts for us and keeping our plans firmly in place. So we're working on the nose flex arms and everything here, fairly straightforward. We drilled out this hole here, right there, sorry, added 440 threads to the 3 holes like has been instructed, glued the maple blocks in place, and next thing we're doing is we are drilling these out and putting our screws in the front of the flex plates, and then we will be moving on to mounting it in the aircraft. All right, so we're test fitting the whole F1 front assembly into the fuselage. As the manual states, it is beneficial to put a bit of a bevel on the edge of former number 1 because as it goes forward like this, it has an angle in the fuselage. So I'm going to just add a slight bevel to our former. So this is one of those tricky spots in the build that is kind of important. Now, just to preface this, guys, I have never put together a BVM kit like this where you're putting all the formers and everything in. Just finished up a TAMS BVM F18, but that was not like this at all. So this is the very first time I'm doing this. I'm using a lot of the techniques and just this thing based on my experience. There's going to be lots of better ways to maybe do this stuff, lots of different suggestions. I appreciate those suggestions as well too, always learning. So the manual's pretty clear on this. We have the right screw done up. The former here is the next thing we need to get aligned. Now, there needs to be a spacer installed underneath the left one. That's going to be determined by this whole former work. Now, one of the important things is that you get F1 former in line with the center line of the aircraft. So just as to have a reference point here, what I've done is I've taken a piece of masking tape, run it along our center line here. So now we've got a representation of the center line through the gear door opening. So what we can do now is we've got a piece of white foam underneath the aircraft. Now we've got lots of play in this former work here to get F1 aligned. But if we take our straight edge, hold it up against F1, now we can adjust this former to be perpendicular with the center line of the fuselage. So that is basically involves kind of twisting and turning it. So if I hold it right there, that is exactly where we need to be for the F1 former. Now, the other thing that's important is you want your leg to be in line with the center line of the aircraft. That's why I've put the leg in there, so we've got a visual representation. So I think the best way to accomplish this is we're going to tack the F1 former in place with some CA. Then we're going to start working on our shimming and center hole for our left mount here. But we want to get this nice and centered in the fuselage first. Okay, so a couple points of reference here. We've tack welded the front former, the F1 former in place. I installed a 1/4 inch extension there, a socket extension, and you can see there that we are running right down the center line of the aircraft. That's just sitting in the gear opening. So that is awesome. The gear gives us a good reference, but this is a really good reference because obviously any imperfection is multiplied at the end of the rod there. Okay, so we're all shimmed and tacked in place here. Now the kit comes with that little shim, which is I think 1/32 or something like that. That actually ended up being the perfect amount, and we've got everything stuck in place and fastened temporarily. I guess not temporarily, just spot stuck in place. So we've just used a little bit of CA on the top part of our former work there to hold that in place. Now one of the things I like about the manual is it says, what is the exact wording here? Tack glue F1 in place, air epoxy when convenient, which is exactly how I like to do things. So what I'll do is I'll try and batch glue my gluing. And in this case, we've got the front former to glue. We've got the door wood structure that we put in there as the very first step to glue. So once we have a bunch of things to glue, then we'll actually do that step. So for the next steps, we need to extend the nose gear. Now we don't have the nose gear controller for this aircraft yet, but fortunately we've got an extra Zycoy one here. Now these units are converted to work with the Zycoy gear controller. So what we've done here is we've set everything up, and we can extend the nose gear now and get that, that's what we need to do to get that door installed. Beautiful. Now the other thing that that nose gear extension does is allows us to confirm that we are happy with our nose wheel, nose leg placement. So plane's flipped upside down with the gear extended, and you can see there the leg looks really good. All right, so we've taken the gear out just for easier access to glue. To get the gear out, we left one of the flex plates installed and undid the gear from the other flex plate, which made that fairly simple to take in and out. So we need to install our door stops on each side of the front nose door. That's the other reason to take the gear out, is this just makes things easier. So we're going to get those glued in place. We've sanded everything right there, and then we are going to do our gluing on the front work here, and then we'll install the gear again back into the aircraft. All right, so the plan for all of our former work is we're going to be using 9462. Anything important and structural, that's generally what I'll use. So we've mixed up some high sol here to glue in our front work. So we have sanded out where everything contacts the fuselage. That's also an important step. I've talked about that already. But in order to get good glue joints, you've got to sand that out. So I'm just going to put a glove on. We're going to get our high sol installed along the F1 former here, and also the front gear work. We're going to put some around the perimeter as instructed in the manual. All right, so F1 former's back in, gears in, and we are good. Let's flip this back over and show you the inside view. All right, and there we go. All of our glue is nicely done and clean. So we're going to move on to the next step in the assembly manual, and we are going to start off with the forward door. So we've already did the aft door previously. We glued these little ply strips or poly strips on there, and next thing we're going to do is start working on our gear door installation. All right, so just working on the gear door here, a fairly simple process. We got the other end of the hinge installed. We had the gear laid down, got the door laid down, and just put tape across the door to hold it in place. We flipped the airframe over. I put a little bit of CA on each side of the hinge, sprayed some kicker in there, held the hinge down, and let that cure. So that's kind of like spot welding that hinge in place and making it so it can operate and we can get it positioned. So we've got that done. The little keeper here for the door gets installed like that, and there's a zip tie that goes around the leg to control all those items. So we're going to get this glued in place next, and the door is almost done. On this side here, we drilled 3 holes through the entire assembly, made a countersink on the door side, and installed 3 screws as per the manual. Now I did pre-treat this seam here. I took my little plane and cut this down. It still needs some work before painting, of course, but it's a lot flatter than the stock one that it was, which looks like that. So door is almost done here. We're just kind of on our last couple steps in the manual. All right, so first problem we've encountered here is the spacing of everything. So a little hard to show you specifically, but basically when this closes, our little piece hits this aluminum tab. So that is a problem. So I think ideally we want that to be sitting right in between the aluminum piece and the F1 former. Now the problem there is when this gear is extended, we're already very close to our little strut nub there. I don't know what to call it. So if we were to move that up to there, it is going to be a problem. So not sure what we're going to do at this point. I'm going to take a look at it and see what we can figure out. So the position in the manual of this guy is not correct. I'll retract this gear and show you. So the wood piece, basically this piece here, has to fit right in between this aluminum piece and this trunnion portion there, so it's very specific. So I actually have a bit of a down angle on it there, and it fits in there beautifully now. So I had to pull the old pieces off and have to remake them. So I remade that piece there, the leg support, and then now we just need to remake the zip tie holder. All right, so we've got everything sorted out here with the nose door. That all worked out good. I tried using a zip tie on this, and because it sits against the aluminum piece right there, I think what we're going to use is probably safety wire on this when we actually put it all together for the final time. I'm just going to leave it loose for now because obviously we've got lots more stuff to deal with. But that is done, which is very successful. So as we go through the manual here, oh yeah, one more thing we have to do is that little screw on there. So I'm going to get that done, and then we'll be finished this step. All right, so we're moving on to the lower equipment tray and F2. Fairly straightforward step. We've found our parts here, laid them all out, and essentially we glue the maple blocks on there. There's some nice lasered cutouts that guide your blocks perfectly, which is awesome. We pop this assembly out of the tray. We split it into its 3 pieces, and we glue our servo screw reinforcers onto the underside. Now what we're going to do is get this positioned inside the fuselage, and we are going to drill our front holes here. Now there's a couple things we want to do beforehand. Number one, we want to sand off the laser cutting brown stuff from the contact points where it's going to mount in the fuselage. And then when we do put this in the fuselage, we want to make sure we have a good reference point where that former is going to fit, and we sand down our inside of our fuselage. All right, so we've got our former number 2 and everything in place. What I've gone ahead and done is marked out our areas on our fuselage with some Sharpie so we know where to sand those out. So we will remove this assembly again, sand those areas out, reinstall it, and we need to put some screws into the front portion here. All right, so we've moved on to our nose gear door section here. We're making our way through this. Now, one thing I want to show you is the plans. We haven't really taken a good look at the plans of this aircraft. So the plans have been have now become Nez's favorite spot to hang out, but the plans show us cool things. So we've been working on this nose gear door area, and for example, right now we're working on the rear door, and it says refer to the plans for the hinge pin. So it gives you the perfect full-size actual dimensions for your hinge pin. So you can take your piano wire, lay it out on here, and you can make your pins perfectly sized. I also made the front nose piano wire hinge pin, and we'll get that installed as well too. So really cool. It shows you also like your cutouts here for your stiffeners and such. So I love that little setup. That's pretty slick for sure. All right, so we've assembled the gear door mount piece as per the manual. So that is all done. We've got our piece of wire in there and everything, so that is set. Now we need to glue our pieces of long poly ply to the sides of the door, so this side here, and then we need to work on making those door notches as instructed. Okay guys, so we have a bit of a request for the Super Bandit. We need scheme ideas. So classic airplane deserves an amazing scheme. So if you have any ideas for pictures or schemes for this aircraft, we'll be discussing them throughout the build. Send me an email, thelightersideofrc@gmail.com. Throw a picture in there for a scheme on this aircraft. There's amazing schemes available. Throw me your ideas and maybe we'll end up using it on this aircraft. All right, so we're moving on to the next steps with the gear door. We've taken our poly ply and we've put it on the opening side and the back side. There's a couple more pieces to install here. One goes on the back of the front door, and there's a couple little pieces that go in here. We're gonna save doing those until later on. What I'm working on now is getting our hinge system completed for the rear front door. So we've done a little bit of sanding on this guy to make it fit. It now fits in the notch receptacle that this piece fits into, and then it just sits over top of the flex plate right there. So what the manual says we need to do is we need to create a 1/32 groove or notch where the hinges are on the fuselage side. So we've marked those guys out right there. Once we get those guys done on the fuselage, then we'll put the door on. We'll get the door side marked out, and we'll put a 3/32 notch out for the hinges on the door as per the manual. All right, so we've done our next step here. We put our little notches on the fuselage side for our gear door, and then we put our other notches on the door side, and we kind of got them all lined up there nicely. So next step in the manual is to get this guy glued in or installed and then spot welded in place, so we can later or very soon install aero epoxy to hold that in place. So we'll get this installed. It's supposed to sit flush with the edge of the fuselage, right kind of in that location. So we'll make sure we do that. We're gonna give the brown stuff a little bit of a sanding treatment first, because that's gonna be where we install our aero epoxy against the fuselage and the piece of wood. All right guys, so we are wrapped up on our back door here. This worked out beautifully. We've got this piece spot glued in place. Now we did the door a little bit backwards. So we put the door in place, got the tape holding it in place, and then I flipped the fuselage over, drilled the screw holes, installed the screws. And then afterwards I wicked some medium CA into the hinges and glued it off with kicker, or kicked it off with kicker. So I find that's much more accurate, and this fits amazingly well. So very happy with how that turned out. Well guys, that is gonna wrap up episode number 1 of the BVM Super Bandit classic build. Just a reminder, comment down below or email me some scheme suggestions for this aircraft. Interested to hear what you guys have to say about that. And what I'll do is, if I get enough pictures, I'll put a little compilation together in one of these upcoming videos with all of the scheme suggestions, and maybe you guys can vote on them as well too. We'll get some input from you. So thanks guys for watching. If you have any questions or comments about this build or anything else, feel free to comment down below. You can also reach out to me by email. If you really want to make sure that I actually get your message, that's the best way to talk to me, the lightersideofrc@gmail.com. Again, we are going to have this build kind of happening, and then it's going to be put a little bit on the back burner as other projects come in. For example, we've got a Carf Rebel coming up as well too, which will be a quick build that will trump this one as well. So anyways, lots of great projects coming up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for visiting the channel, and we'll see ya in the next video.